Welcome to the Capes and Tights podcast. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg, right here on capesandtights.com. This week's episode features Jordan Blum, Patton Oswalt, and Tim Seeley. This is our first episode with three guests. Jordan Blum is known for the book Minor Threats over at Dark Horse, M.O.D.O.K head games at DC, as well as Extreme Venomverse, Edge of Spider-Verse, as well as he's the co-creator and writer of the M.O.D.O.K TV show on Hulu. Patton Oswalt also co-wrote Minor Threats, M.O.D.O.K head games, and also co-wrote M.O.D.O.K's TV show over at Hulu, but as well also a writer on Black Hammer and JLA Welcome to the Working Week. Also starred on King of Queens and Ratatouille, as well as with many other movies and TV shows. And then Tim Seeley, writer of one of my favorite comic books of all time, The Revival, as well as Hack Slash, Local Man with our friend Tony Fleece, West of Sundown, The Roadie, and many other books over the years, from the big two to the independent publishers and so much more. This episode, we talked about their comic book, Tim's, Jordan's, and Patton's comic book, The Alternates, over at Dark Horse, which is a spin-off of the Minor Threats series released earlier this year. You can grab The Alternates on your local comic book shop's shelves on September 13th, 2023, as well as the Minor Threats trade paperback available right now. This episode, was fun. We talked about the comic book, the Minor Threats book, and so much more. Enjoy. But before you do, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter, as well as follow us, rate, review, all that stuff over at Spotify and Apple Podcasts. This is episode number 123, featuring Patton Oswalt, Jordan Blum, and Tim Seeley, writers on The Alternates from the world of Minor Threats. Enjoy, everyone.
All right. Should we stay on Wizard Magazine?
Exactly. We stay on Wizard Magazine. Yeah, exactly. No, well, welcome to the podcast. Chatting for a little bit there is it's funny to do all those get all the stuff that you don't want to say on the recording out before. There's some really good stuff we talked about. No, I'm kidding. Well, welcome to the podcast, and you two, Jake, for taking time out, and Patton will join us hopefully at some point here. But let's chat. First of all,
well, the reason we don't want to talk about
Wizard
Magazine we don't want to talk about Wizard Magazine on the podcast is because we clearly just plan to launch our own podcast. Yes. We're talking about Wizard Magazine. We got to save it for that.
Right. Can't do it here. That would be giving up our inside weapon to fame. Here is us talking about Wizard Magazine every week that people could die to listen to.
Well, you got to get Charles Soule and Ryan Brown on there and call it Wizard Magazine, so you can take the whole curse words part of it on there too. Then you just change the copyright. You don't worry about that anymore.
Right. And Ryan lives right down the street, out my window here, just down the street. I could easily bring him in for us, so no problem.
And isn't Charles Soule a lawyer? I'm sure he has tons of time to talk about Wizard Magazine.
Oh, yeah.
He's also not busy at all, like any of you.
At all.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're here to talk about comic books and Minor Threats and The Alternates and all that stuff. For those who don't know, obviously, Jordan, you and Patton started Minor Threats over at Dark Horse. We want to talk mostly about The Alternates, as in, because it's the one that's coming out here pretty soon, as well. Tim was the writer on it as well. So, but do you want to give a little synopsis, Jordan, on what the Minor Threats is in that the trade just came out before we get into everything else?
Yeah, absolutely. So Minor Threats, the first volume, is a story about C-list supervillains, kind of the jobbers, the working class villains who band together when an A-list villain has kind of overstepped, killed a sidekick, and brought all this heat down on the city, and decide they're going to go after this A-lister and take him out and collect the bounty on him. And of course, nothing goes right. So it's definitely kind of a Coen Brothers meets the Flash's Rogues kind of story, where we really wanted to tell the perspective of, these guys who usually get webbed up in the cold open of the Spider-Man comic or, tied to a telephone pole, and give them their due and get to kind of the heart of what makes these guys tick and why would they, put on these masks and commit to this life of getting, beat up by the Batmans of the world. So, it was really about, again, telling a new, fresh perspective. And, Tim, I think, saw that and found another story to kind of, that felt more like a spiritual cousin, I think, to what we had done, which was, let's investigate the perspective of these other characters. You never get to hear their kind of point of view, or what is it like to exist in a universe that has 60 years of comic continuity, and how that can really ruin your life. So Tim, do you want to kind of take us into your pitch that you brought to us that we were so excited about?
Yeah, well, so Jordan and I have known each other for a while. We're working on a adaptation of one of my comics, and so we talked a lot about things that we liked, and we'd come up with a lot of ideas. Jordan and I probably have the closest aesthetic of any two people in comics, like the things we like, and then Pat is really close. But he had sent me the first issue of Minor Threats when they got it all finished up. And I'm a fan of Scott Hepburn's art, and then also I was talking to Pat about this yesterday. Pat wrote one of my favorite superhero books of all time, which is called JLA Welcome to the Working Week, which is this JLA story from like the early 2000s that kind of has just like the stuff that's not the superhero stuff about superheroes, which I thought was so great. So, but inspired their book inspired this idea, which was essentially, if we're talking about sort of the B superhero characters, there's probably or villain characters, there must be these B superheroes. And I thought about what would happen, if you were the characters in this world, you were like, you were not the starring characters, you're the ones that get your book canceled all the time. You're the guest starring role, but then you got rebooted and you got made into something more sophisticated, right? So obviously I'm doing a little bit of a metaphor here for characters like Animal Man and Swamp Thing, and those kind of characters that became these, these adult sophisticated characters, Sandman being one of them. So our stand-in characters for this is, what if it happened? What if you got rebooted, you became sophisticated and appreciated and adult, and you saw things in a new way, and then you got shuffled back and stuffed back into that universe that you used to be part of. So it's essentially this, a lot of these characters sort of dealing with kind of like drug withdrawal. They're sort of drug addicts to some degree for this life they used to have. So I pitched it at Jordan Patton, and of course, both of them are big 90s Vertigo fans. And so we started throwing stuff back together, and the story really congealed really quickly. And it's so amazing how easily it ties into their bigger Twilight City and the ideas that they have for their world. And so it's kind of, it's a parallel idea. It's a little bit of a satire, but it also has high stakes and has very grounded emotional things, even though it's set in this fantastical superhero world.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
obviously, both of you guys know what it's like. What were you going to say, Jordan?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think, what it captures really well is sometimes when you do these stories, that kind of break down superhero comics, there can be this attitude of like, wasn't this dumb? Or look at the, if this existed in the real world, this would be insane. But I think these are love letters to comics we love, in the way that the first Minor Threats was a love letter to, again, the C-listers, the morts of the month, if we're talking about Wizard, the losers who commit to crime. And then this was to early Vertigo, which again was based on, here's a bunch of characters, Animal Man, Doom Patrol, people like them, but they don't really sustain their books, no one's really using them. Go off and do adult comics with them and tell new stories and stuff. So I love that, but I also love the fact that these characters had two-dimensional superhero stories in their background, and how do you make sense of these two kind of identities of publishing identities almost. So I think that's what really spoke to me in Tim's pitch of making that metafiction, making that part of the story.
It's I've said it before, which is becoming more and more wrong for me to say it. It's hard to create a superhero or type universe outside of the big two for a while there. There's only a few ones were successful. Obviously, Tim, you've been able to do that too over with Local Man with Tony, and then obviously you guys with Minor Threats and the alternates. But it's these different stories. You can't just make your own. Not everybody can be Invincible and Robert Kirkman and like create their own like superhero universe. It's like that. You guys have to make this different. And that's what I love about it. I love it that it's actually a different story. It's the stuff that people aren't talking about in the big two. This is the things that are like, the C-list characters. It's just so much fun to follow that don't have the one character that takes over and just sells the title because it says Batman on it or Joker on it or something like that. It's so cool to have these other stories that we would love, all of us would love to see out of these Marvel and DC books, but just never going to happen. And that's what's cool about, not never going to happen, but more unlikely to happen. But it's cool about what you guys are doing with Minor Threats and the alternates. Is the actual title Minor Threats, whatever it's called, the alternates, or is it just going to be called the alternates?
From the world of Minor Threats, the alternates.
Okay, so that's the name, or maybe.
Yeah.
You have to ask Dark Horse.
I think it's actually. I think the solicitation does say from the world of Minor Threats, the alternates. But like you said, most people are going to call it the alternates, knowing that it's part of the Minor Threats universe, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Absolutely. And
go ahead, Jordan. Yeah.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
That's like, you were saying about the difficulty of sort of creating these superhero universes, and part of it is it's just like most people get everything they need in superheroes from the Marvel movies, and then there's some people who get them from the Marvel movies and the DC movies, and some people who get it from the Marvel movies and the DC movies and the Marvel comics, and at some point it's like people, superheroes have dominated the comic medium for so long, and for a whole lot of reasons, but it is hard, and maybe there's not always a good reason to do something other than it because there's so much of that material already. And I feel like Minor Threats is the reason to do it because there's so few sort of where it's okay to be fun and it's okay to laugh about superheroes. It's when you do that at Marvel and DC, you usually find yourself you get a lot of angry fans because they don't like it when you make fun of this stuff. They feel like you're insulting them, and I think they're a little bit sensitive about the fact that most of these things were created for children anyway. So I think the idea that when you come into this, you have to find something that they can't do, and it's really become clear over the years that's really difficult for Marvel and DC to make fun, funny, satirical comics. It's not really something they can pull off, and their fans don't respond to it. But I think Minor Threats proves you can. Because it's a big success, and it's also, I think Jordan Patton managed to find this thing where, it's funny, and the characters have these sort of almost ridiculous names, but they're really sincere, and also the stakes are high, which I think is also hard to do in satirical stuff. It's probably why The Tick, which is one of my favorite comics of all time, I think has some degree trouble sort of staying relevant or new, is because sooner or later it sort of loses the stakes, right? You're sort of having a laugh, and I think that's something that they figured out with Minor Threats that I really felt like, that's valuable, and that's something that we can expand upon too.
Yeah, I think for us, Pat and I are obviously huge movie nerds, and it was kind of finding what are the subgenres here, because I think that's how you can find new stories. So we knew we wanted to do low-level crime caper, like I said, like a Coen Brothers vibe, these are the lowest people on the totem pole, but they're desperate and they want to escape their reality. So they're going to put on these costumes and commit these crimes. And I think with the alternates, it's a story about addiction and recovery, ultimately, that happens to be about superheroes and mirror universes where they get to be, the best versions of themselves, or these heightened versions, and then coming back to reality, which I think is a lot like what drug addiction is. My own personal one, not to get too, I was addicted to Adderall in college because it unlocked in my mind the best version of me, and I wasn't on, or especially when I was working on productions, or even interacting with people, is like, I got to unlock the best version of Jordan through this pill. And this is not an anti-Adderall rant. If it works for you, good. I overdid it, and I do not use it anymore. But it was very much this. I got it, everything is dull and boring until I activate this version of me. And I think that's very much in this of like, imagine you got to, go over to another universe and you were a god, or you were this bigger thing, and your powers and your consciousness was expanded. And now you're back to this tiny little superhero world where you got to just fight the bad guys. And how do you go back to that? How does Swamp Thing go back to just being a horror character after he's been this much bigger thing that connects to the green and is saving universes and stuff? Yeah, so I just found that to be fascinating.
Absolutely. We got Patton in the house.
Hey, Patton.
Oh, hi. Okay, good. I didn't know whether you guys could hear me. Hi,
welcome.
Sorry, this day is crazy. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having us on, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just continue rolling here then. I mean, so my biggest question was when I was reading the alternates and when I got that from Dark Horse's PR was this, like, obviously Tim pitched the idea, but was the plan to do more just different stories in the Minor Threats world instead of just continuing on with like what you had originally done with the first 4 issues? Was this like tell these little pocket stories in this world originally before this pitch came in?
Initially, I'm going to be totally honest, we were just focused on the 4 issues, on the story. And then as we went along, and this is very much due to Scott Hepburn's artwork, the little stuff he would fill in on the sides, these little other characters where we would begin to wonder, what is this character's story? What is their background? What are they doing? And the fact that it attracted someone like Tim Seeley to go, wait a minute, what if this, that it happened very, very organically. It happened. I mean, obviously we love the fact that there are massive stories going on in the background. As Jordan was saying, what does 60 years of continuity look like when it's never fully repaired or fixed? We just didn't realize how fertile the soil was that we were laying down. And it's very gratifying to know that.
And we like the idea that if Redport, where the Minor Threats, the first book is set, is like Staten Island, well, then what's the Brooklyn or Queens of Twilight City, and who would live there? What characters would inhabit it? And I think Tim really ran with that like, over here is Frankie's story and what it's like to live over there, but over here is a whole new set of kind of characters and inhabitants of the world. And it just, to me, Tim's idea felt, like I said, like spiritually right. It captured all the things I think we were going for in the first volume, but focusing on a completely new type of story that, again, felt unique and a different perspective we hadn't seen.
And it allowed us to sort of get something ahead so that those guys could work on the important stuff, which was the continuation of their story, Playtime story. And we could kind of do this like parallel thing, and and then the real stars, they could really line up and knock this thing out of the park. So, happy to do it, happy to keep the people fed and busy while they're really clamoring for your stuff, guys. So,
but again, the parallel story is so captivating and speaks to a much bigger thing going on in this world that the main characters, people like the Searcher, they don't actually see that, but you realize how crucial the side stories are. I love that aspect of history that, in the early 70s, there's probably some massive Emerson, Lake and Palmer concert going on at Madison Square Garden. At the meantime, in a rec room down in the Bronx at someone's birthday party, literally hip hop is being invented. And that is actually, there's a friggin' plaque there now where that first house party happened. So you never know when the next seismic, the next seismic thing is always happening, and it rarely has cameras on it when it goes down.
That's an awesome metaphor. That's great.
Yeah. And we found, I think, very organic ways to, there are some characters from the first Minor Threats that show up in the alternates, but again, they all made sense for the story, I think. And we love shared universe stuff, but we never wanted to get in the way of what the alternates was about.
Yeah. And you obviously put together this story with Tim and all that stuff. And obviously Scott is not the interior artist on this one. Was that just because it's this offshoot and that Scott is going to come back at some point? Or is this just how it fell? Like, how did this happen with Scott not doing interiors on this one?
Tim just refused to work with them. It was just real ugly.
I have a no Canadians rule. It's a hard, firm rule. No Canadians. They make me uncomfortable. But we would love to have had Scott, but he was busy. But I think the thing we thought was important, Scott was going to start working on the next Minor Threat stuff, and we really felt like he should also be involved aesthetically, though, because I think it's exactly what Patton was saying, is that Scott is this insane visual creative. He just pumps out these amazing ideas and all these designs, and when you see one of Scott's designs, you're like, what's the story? That's like a it's like a Dave Cockrum, Jack Kirby sort of thing. Like when Stan Lee saw the Silver Surfer and was like, "What's that dude? Is he Space Jesus?" And Jack's like, "I don't know. I just drew it." And that's kind of Scott's aesthetic, right? And so for the first, when we came up with the names, I think we kind of bandied about these ideas. And so I had the idea for the name, the Tripper, and Jordan or Patton had the name for Crab Louie, and we just kind of threw these things back, multi-monster and all these kind of characters. We just sort of threw them around, and then so I would do a draft of them as a design, and then we would give it to Great and Powerful Scott, and he would be like, "Yay or nay." Or he would, add some designs, or he did takes on them when they were the original heroes that they first appeared as. So it really left us some room, to sort of, it's aesthetically in the same wheelhouse. And then we could also just have the maestro come in and go like, check, check, check.
Mm-hmm.
Put some purple on that one, and then we're good.
And his covers, he did all the A covers,
yes.
And they're some of the best. I think his best work ever. It's incredible.
Yeah. It's like, and again, even in the covers where he's just doing a cover, he adds little details that make you ask questions about the world. He's just, he's so fabulous.
And that's to say, he is, and that's what I was saying. Not to take away from Christopher Mitten and Tess Fowler, they did a wonderful job on this book, but like there was something where I was like, oh, it's like, well, no, it wasn't a letdown. It was one of those ones that you were hoping to see that, and I didn't. And then I was like, but the artwork in the alternates is absolutely phenomenal as well. So you just added to your team of phenomenal creators.
Well, we really lucked out with Mittens and with Tess Fowler. Mittens' art has this wonderful tension to it where you feel like, yes, these are people back in the normal world. They're not on the ledge anymore, but you can feel them bristling with the need to reconnect to that world. And then having Tess show what that world actually was, how much more richer and rewarding and wonderful it was to live in. You really get these people's pain. So the collaboration between Mittens and Fowler showing that tension, I think, is fantastic for this book. We really lucked out.
I was just thinking you guys are going for the more people possible to list inside of a book, saying working on a book.
I think they also capture that, both of them, their styles capture that 90s Vertigo stuff in different ways. Like Christopher stuff like reminds me a ton of like early Doom Patrol and stuff, while Tess's reminds me more of the covers, to Vertigo. Like the Swamp Thing covers and the Sandman covers. So I think it's like they both invoke a period, but they're very different. And I think, I love the way that they kind of fit together.
Right.
And adding to that, you have other covers. Obviously, Tim did a cover where you have Fabio Moon, you got Martin Simmons, you got Tony Fleece. Like these cover artists you guys are getting for these things are insane.
We called in all the favors, basically. We're just
Tess did an alt cover for issue 4 of Minor Threats that I was so blown away by that I bought the original art immediately. I was like, I'm not even negotiating with anyone else. What do you want for this? I'll pay you right now. It's so fabulous.
I'm a big fan of Tim's artwork too, so that adds to it. Not you were just a throw in, but
I know.
Right? According to Dark Horse, it's like, do you want this Tim guy on with you too?
Everybody's like, wait, you draw? And it's like, no, just a little. I dabble, and I just a single tear roll down my face. And
I love the Tim cover. The Tim cover is one of my favorites because it absolutely hits like the mundane we want, the absurdity of the mundane of a crab guy sitting there touching a body that's a little body. Like that to me is the book. So that piece really clicked for me with what the vibe of the book was.
And I should add in there, we talked before we started recording, which was that Ryan Brown also has a cover on issue 2, which big fan of Ryan Brown's as well. So that adds that.
Oh boy.
Tim's neighbor.
Triumphant. Yeah. Crab Louie. I think you don't want to like predict these things like, oh, this is going to be the character everyone loves, but I think that's going to be the character everyone's going to love, and his take on it is.
In Minor Threats, I got the feel from reading the book that both Jordan and Patton, you guys love comic books. Like there's this thing that comes through that's not written on the pages, but shows that you love comic books. And then you add in alternates, it just adds that even more because you can feel that Tim also loves comic books. And I love that about the comic book because it just shows it's like your love letter. It's the love letter to people who love comics. And it's people who aren't big comic book fans, like deep, long-term comic book fans are going to love these books, but also it's the people who are long-term comic book fans will love it even more, if that makes any sense.
Well, yeah. And I think that you can't really either deconstruct or satirize something unless you actually love it. That satire that comes from, I hate this thing and it's lame, always falls flat. But satire that comes from, I love this thing, why didn't it go farther? Why didn't it give me more of what I love? That's when you get the truly great satires, pastiches, tributes. That's where you get that. You know, Alan Moore didn't hate comic books when he did The Watchmen. He was just like, there's stuff that's missing and I want to put that in there, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing with this.
I think comics could, especially like a certain kind of superhero, which has kind of become like, there's this sort of moving towards like these things have to be practical and they have to be, you know, realistic and grounded. And there's this sort of slow disdain for like the goofy shit. And I love the goofy shit in superhero books. Like, one of the things that they did in the first Minor Threats was they had the Boulevard of Broken Time and just these things that, or you know, like the giant dead kaiju and that's such cool stuff because it's sincere love for something. It's like sort of seeing it through to its end. But I love that stuff. That, you know, that's the reason to read superhero books for me, because if I wanted to read like hard crime books, I wouldn't read Batman. I would read, you know, like a David Simon story or something. So I feel like the ideas of being able to do these sort of loving tributes to the things that made superheroes work for so long, you know, I feel like it's more needed now than ever because there's this action against it. Like everything has to be now, you know, super badass, you know, Mortal Kombat kind of stuff. And it's like, I would rather us get into the weird, like a lot.
It reminds me, you know, working on, when I started working on American Dad, Seth MacFarlane would always be like, why tell this in animation? If you can do it anywhere else, don't make it an animated show. And I feel like we ask ourselves the same thing, like, why can you only tell this in a superhero universe? Like, we don't want to have two scenes of two normal people just sitting down and talking. Like, there's gotta be that extra element of like, this could only exist here. There's something happening in the background. There's something that fills in the world that goes, only superhero stories can do this.
And I think with the C-list characters and the things like Minor Threats and the bar and stuff like that, like we always see these big characters doing big world-ending things. Like the fact that you don't actually get to see them have a drink and hang out and complain about the old days or things like that. And that's something that's cool about things like the bar and Minor Threats and so on. And what you're going to get in Minor Threats universe compared to other universes, they try here and there, they dabble it here and there. Like, you know, Marvel did release that Damage Control book recently with trying to get more like, you know, what happens after a big destroyed city, you know, so on and so forth. But like, I don't know, Minor Threats is going to give you that some of these big twos are not going to give you.
Yeah, it's the mundane and the absurd, I think, is what we love. And I think both books start there, right? You have, like you said, a bar in the first one, and in the alternates, it's a support group. And they're drinking shitty coffee and pulling up folding chairs and sitting in a circle, but it launches them into this whole other kind of story.
Wonderful. And you know what? I'm going to call his name out. And you have your editor extraordinaire there from over at Dark Horse. Daniel is one of the best editors in comic books. And you guys are lucky enough to have Daniel on these books. You know, what's it like working with Daniel?
He breathes down our neck when he doesn't have to. It's much appreciated. Like, because we're always going to get it done. But it's like a good reminder that we have this monthly force to get us through this. But
his whole thing is ABC, always be comicking. And, you know, and coffee is for comicers. And if we get, I think if we're the top selling book, what do we get? A Cadillac?
That's right.
And the second selling book is Steak Knives. And third selling book is You're Pulped. And that's his whole thing.
That's it. We don't take nothing after just go die. Yeah.
I mean, exactly. Mignola seems to have all the Cadillacs though, and Lemire. We have a lot of Steak Knives.
Yeah.
But yeah, Daniel was on once before on the podcast before too. We chatted a bunch about different things, and this is right. Honestly, he came on before Minor Threats was even out. But I anything I feel like I've ever read, I'm like, wow, I really like this book from Dark Horse. And I look, oh, edited by Daniel. Just either Daniel's just attaching himself to books that are really good in the first place, or he has some sort of input that's helping these books get along.
Yeah.
Oh, he's fantastic. I mean, he's behind all these. Again, you look at the other books, Black Hammer and stuff, and there are all these brand new universes, and he has helped grow those into what they are. And he's also an amazing facilitator. Like, we've gotten these incredible covers because of Daniel's relationships, and he's very good at picking the right artist for the right cover and all that stuff. So he's been amazing.
So these stories, like the alternates, is going to drop in September. September 13th, I think, is the first issue debuts.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that's right. Yeah. We are sadly recording this after, or actually on today must be FOC. Am I right about that?
I think the final order.
So it's not, people are, this isn't going to matter, but still tell your local comic book shop that you want it, because hopefully either they'll be able to get it or get second printings or things like that if it sells really well, which it should sell really well. It's a really good book. And then the second issue comes in October. Is this something you just mentioned more alternate, more stuff in the Minor Threats thing. You're rolling with this. You're doing more with this. You're going to do as much as you possibly are allowed to do at Dark Horse, I'm guessing. Is that correct?
Yeah. We say no. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we just want to keep building this universe. It's the best.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I'm excited for more on this stuff too. But the book is amazing. I read the first issue. I'm excited to see where it goes and what more happens. There's a lot that happens in this first issue. It's exciting. Minor Threats is amazing. Minor Threats available in trade. People should get that as well. But I mean, other than that, is there anything else going on in the world of the three of you that you can talk about, that you want to talk about at all? I don't want, like I said, there's some things going on in Hollywood that are not. You guys are still striking. Are you guys picketing at all over there in Jordan and Patton?
Yeah. We're picketing, raising money, and we're out there.
That's good. That's good.
Getting
that word out.
Yeah.
This is the darkest the writers ever looked. We're out there getting for the first time. This is crazy. We don't know what to do with ourselves. I'm used to having just like a curtain pulled and typing.
I forget who it was. I think it was it might have been Kevin Smith and Mark Menardin's podcast. Mark was talking about how when the writers were on strike, they were the best looking people on the picket line, and then when the actors went on strike, they're like, oh, now we're not going to be the best looking people on the picket line anymore. But exactly. But so I'm so pumped that you guys came on here to talk the alternates, Minor Threats, all that stuff. I was trying to explain to people, I don't usually try to promote my podcast within my other job just because I like to separate the two, but there's like certain ones where I'm like, no, I'm really excited to talk to these people about this book. And I was explaining to people, and I forget all the time that they don't read comics. So when I start saying, like, The Revival is one of my favorite comic books of all time, Tim's going to be on there, M.O.D.O.K Games is amazing, yada yada yada, they're like, who are these people?
Oh my god.
Because I don't read comics. But then I say things like, oh other things you guys do, TV and movie related and things like that. They're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. I was like,
got nothing. I just I want to get in this game. I'll go pick it with you guys. Maybe I'll get hired.
Tell them to read Local Man, which I think
yes.
And
oh my god, if you love hate 90s Image comics the way that Tim Seeley clearly loves / hates them, Local Man is a work of love and genius and cringe. I cannot recommend it any higher.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, like I said, Revival is tops. I was late to the game on Revival. I hate to say that, but I was. And my local comic book shop owner and I were both like, how the hell were we this late to Revival? And I'm so pissed that I missed it on the first initial run, but I read it afterwards, and it's one of my favorites. And so I'm really excited to see what you guys are doing more with this stuff. And I'm excited for everything. Right? Keep up the great work. That's all I'm going to say on that.
Yay!
Well, thank you for having us.
We'll try.
Absolutely.
Thanks, man. Thanks so much.
Yes. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to do this. You guys are busy people. Keep up the great work. Grab the alternates on September 13th at your local comic book shop, as well as the Minor Threats. Grab it at the same time. Why not, right? Grab Minor Threats. Read that.
Yeah, why not?
And trade. Yeah, why not? So I really appreciate you guys taking the time. And again, thank you. I really do.
Thanks, guys.
Take it easy.
Take it easy, guys.
Bye, guys.